Looking for a pickup truck to get just about anything done? Look no further. The Chevy Silverado EV isn't just the most powerful Silverado ever, with next-level towing capability and technology. It also offers game-changing versatility with the available multi-flex midgate and tailgate, which means Silverado EV helps you carry large, bulky, and oddly shaped items up to nearly 11 feet in length. Chevrolet. Together, let's drive. Visit Chevrolet.com to learn more.
This episode is brought to you by Shopify. Upgrade your business with Shopify, home of the #1 checkout on the planet. Shop Pay boosts conversions up to 50%, meaning fewer carts going abandoned and more sales going cha-ching. So if you're into growing your business, get a commerce platform that's ready to sell wherever your customers are. Visit Shopify.com to upgrade your selling today.
Hey, I'm Ryan Reynolds. Recently, I asked Mint Mobile's legal team if big wireless companies are allowed to raise prices due to inflation. They said yes. And then when I asked if raising prices technically violates those onerous 2-year contracts, they said, "What the f*** are you talking about, you insane Hollywood ass?" So to recap, we're cutting the price of Mint Unlimited from $30 a month to just $15 a month. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 up front for 3 months plus taxes and fees. Promo rate for new customers for limited time. Unlimited more than 40 gigabytes per month. Slows full terms at mintmobile.com.
What can you say about the last week in Canadian politics other than, oh my God, what happened? Hello, I'm Brian Lilly. Welcome to the Full Comment Podcast. Because I'm laughing because I don't know what else to do. If you asked me to write a script for an incredibly botched attempt at changing up your government at a time of a national crisis, I don't think I could have come up with what happened this week. And if I did, editors and, studio executives in Hollywood would say, that's way too far-fetched. That would never happen. That's far too stupid. But this is where we are with the Trudeau government and where we're at. Joining me to talk about all of this are two esteemed columnists from Postmedia. We've got Chris Selley from the National Post, Lorne Gunter with the Edmonton Sun, and gents, who wants to take a first kick at the can at Justin Trudeau firing his finance minister 3 days before she's supposed to deliver the fall economic statement so that he can replace her with someone who didn't say yes to the job or apparently backed out after, and then getting torpedoed by him all at a time when we're facing a national crisis of 25% tariffs on all Canadian goods into the United States. And Donald Trump is just lapping this up. Lauren, you're smiling. Do you want to go?
Yeah, sure. This is, of course, what we call in this business low-hanging fruit. You don't have to go looking for column topics now for several days because this is just self-fulfilling. I got a great kick out of this. Chris said something in a column earlier this week that I thought was absolutely bang on. He said Trudeau and his entourage think that celebrity and communications are 90% of governing, that you don't really have to do anything. And even Chrystia Freeland, in her parting shot at Trudeau, said, no, we have to do things. And you don't seem capable of doing it, so I'm leaving. And this, I went back and looked in our archives for columns that I had written after Trudeau had become the leader in 2013, but before he'd become the prime minister in 2015. And on 3 occasions, I called him an intellectual lightweight. I think we're seeing the proof of that. I mean, the man is not capable of running a government. He's a narcissist. He's an egotist. He is self-absorbed, and he's not very bright. And that's not a real good combination.
Chris, you want to take a run at this?
I mean, I think two things stand out to me. First of all, one is how alone he seems to be. I mean, does he actually have no one in his inner circle or even some other somewhat outer circle who are telling him that he has to go? And if he doesn't, how is that even possible? I mean, how has he lasted this long with no one with an ounce of common sense talking in his ear? And the second thing is, just to go back to what you said, like he told Chrystia Freeland that he was going to replace her as finance minister with someone who had not agreed to become the finance minister. Like, that's almost sort of degenerate gambler behavior, right? Like, you owe the one bookie $500, so you bet 1,000 on the on the Steelers or something to try and cover that off the next time. I mean, I just don't understand how everything that we've seen, to me, in the last week is kind of in keeping with Justin Trudeau's character that we know of him, but like multiplied by 2, like taken to the maximum extent. And I just can't imagine what he thinks he's doing, hanging on. Where does he think? It's like he's hanging onto a rising balloon, and at some point he's going to have to let go.
Well, hanging on to a leaking balloon
or a sinking balloon. Yeah, it's terrible.
Chris,
it's a terrible metaphor now that I think about it.
You know what used to happen in cases like this is that the power brokers in the party, who were largely big fundraisers, but not necessarily, they would all be senior people, and they would get together at the time when the leader's shelf life had run out, and they would say, hey, you've done a great job. We'll find you something very cushy to fall into, but it's time for you to go. But since we've had the change in how parties are funded in Canada, and no one can give more than a few $1,000s a year, there aren't those big fundraisers anymore, and there isn't sort of a Senate for the party. There isn't this brains trust up at the top who can say, yeah, we're not going to win an election with you again. For the good of the party, the good of the country, let's step out. And he was very smart. Trudeau was very smart when he took over as leader, in that he put all key loyalists in every function in the party and in the caucus.
And he changed the rules. He changed the rules on how leaders get moved in and out.
That's right. And so there isn't someone who can easily move him in or out.
Well, I would argue that caucus has all the power they need to move in or out. They're just so used to being lapdogs at this point. They can't envisage anything about their jobs that isn't working for Justin Trudeau. And as you say, for all of the people that he's installed within the party, I mean, if they just refuse to do anything that the PMO says, then he's screwed. They have leverage. They just don't know how to use it anymore.
You've got guys like Mark Garrettson who are convinced they're going to get into cabinet, and this is his last great shot.
Yeah, that's right.
We should note that we're discussing this. We're recording at 12:30 on Thursday, before Trudeau's Friday cabinet shuffle. So we know that it's happening. 11:30, Rideau Hall on Friday. But we don't know what the result will be. But you've got greasy pole climbers like Mark Garrettson, who is most likely to lose his seat. Kingston and the Islands, that survived when Stephen Harper had his sweep in 2011. That was, I think, pretty much the only Liberal seat between basically the GTA and Ottawa was Kingston in the Islands, likely going to turn blue in the next election. But he's hanging on for hope beyond hope that he's going to get in cabinet for the final days of Trudeau's regime.
It's something to put on a resume.
Well, as we've all been hearing, I'm sure, there are backbenchers who have turned down the Prime Minister's invitation to join the cabinet. In all of my time, I mean, you hear one or two people over time, hey, Mr. Prime Minister, I have some skeletons in my closet. You really don't want to go there. In this era where the Prime Minister's office can check your background to the infinite detail easily, but some of their past appointments prove they don't really do that.
Yeah.
They don't have the Google.
No,
they can Google, but they don't always.
That's right. But now we're hearing like 4 and 5 and maybe more backbenchers who've been offered cabinet posts have said no.
And for Francois-Philippe Champagne, Frankie Bubbles, as I call him, a guy that I've touted many times as a potential successor for Trudeau, apparently said, yeah, I don't want a promotion. I don't want to be finance minister. Don't move me. Just leave me alone.
Yeah.
Well, apparently he had Mark Carney all lined up. Why would he need Francois-Philippe Champagne, right? I mean, wait.
If only Scott Bryson hadn't resigned. Oh, wait, that's another scandal going back a little bit longer. Let's remind people of something that's a little embarrassing for Lorne's past and get his take on it, that you used to work for a Liberal MP years ago.
I used to work for a Liberal senator.
Senator. I mean, I'm sorry for bringing up your big red Liberal past, Lorne, but I mean, you spent time around the Hill. have you ever seen anything like this? On Monday when it initially happened, I said, well, I can kind of put like a small comparison to when Paul Martin was fired from Chrétien's cabinet. But that happened over a weekend, and everyone knew there was tension between them, and Martin had been trying to overtake the party, but it wasn't really a real comparison. I said, that's as close as I can think. I haven't seen anything like this ever. And it comes at a time when we're dealing with this very real threat of Trump tariffing everything coming out of Canada, and he's lapping it up. He's out there on Truth Social making fun of Trudeau the whole time.
Yeah, absolutely. And no, I've never seen anything like this. I mean, the rivalry between Paul Martin and Jean Chrétien was a rivalry. The two of them both wanted to be leader of the same party, so they had to have this saw-off. There is no competing power base against Trudeau. He's avoided the creation by anyone else of a power base within the party that could challenge him. He's unrivaled, he's unchallenged, and he is still self-destructing.
Well, and I'm amazed. This offer to Chrystia Freeland. I mean, boy, what a plum job dealing with the Trump administration 24/7. He offered
but remind people. I mean, we'll give kudos to the Globe and Mail for this reporting. Stephanie Levitz, great reporter over at the Globe. What was the full offer, Chris?
Well, so the offer, as Stephanie reported it, was that she, instead of being finance minister, she would be in charge of sort of the Canada-U.S. relations file, but without a ministry to run. This would just be her, I mean, what an offer!
So no staff, no money, no authority.
Well, yeah, I don't know, but what struck me,
they were going to clean out a storage room over at Global Affairs, and she could go in there to this windowless room and have a phone or something.
Yeah, there's no cell signal. But I mean, like, what struck me first of all was if that plan had been in place for more than like 72 hours before he came up with it, wouldn't he have taken Chrystia Freeland down to Florida to meet with Donald Trump for that dinner? I mean, wouldn't that have been a logical thing to do if he was planning to put her in charge of Canada-U.S. relations? And then Trump comes out with this tweet, or I don't know if it was on Twitter or on
it was on Truth Social.
On Truth Social.
Which I've had to join just so I can know what the president-elect is saying about Canada.
So where he basically implies, and I mean, I don't know, but he basically called her totally toxic, which basically undermined Trudeau further and just made the whole plan, if that's the right word for it, that he had, look even more crazy.
So, look, we're laughing heartily at this, and I'm having a bit of Schadenfreude with Trudeau's problems, but at the same time, this is incredibly serious for our country. I'm not exaggerating when I call this a national crisis. If those 25% tariffs come in, we are going to shave several points off of our GDP within a couple of months. There will be thousands, perhaps hundreds of thousands of Canadians who lose their jobs. I read people like Dan Gardner, who used to write for the Ottawa Citizen. Then he went to the Trudeau PMO. Then he wrote a pointy-headed book that people love that says a lot about nothing. And he's out there saying, well, we should just block all of our exports to the United States. We should, refuse to sell them oil or anything else. And I think the only reason this fool can say that is that he is a member of the laptop class that does not rely on any job that involves manufacturing or resource extraction or agriculture or any of the things that put food on the table for millions of Canadians.
He is of the class that surrounded Kamala Harris during the U.S. presidential election, and that is why the Democrats lost, because they are completely out of touch with where ordinary people are. They don't have the same worries and concerns. They don't have the same risks that ordinary people do. Ordinary people know that for the last 5 or 6 years, either the COVID or the economy has put them at risk of losing their family income. And they're not prepared to then go with some airy-fairy progressive ideas that sound really good to Justin Trudeau and the liberal elite. So this is exactly the kind of thinking that A, leads to the Freedom Convoy, and B, leads to the Liberals being wiped out in the next election. I mean, there's always been this theory in Canadian politics that the floor for the Conservatives is much lower than the floor for the Liberals. The Liberals can't fall below where Ignatieff took them in the low 30s. I keep looking at polls from all sorts of different regions around the country, as both of you have. I can see the Liberals going down to 5 seats, 10 seats, 15 seats, like being all but wiped out.
The latest Abacus poll, the latest Ipsos poll, has them at 15% in British Columbia. And, you know, I hear from grumpy people out your way, Lorne, that always blame everything on Ontario and Quebec for voting in the Liberals. But if you look at Justin Trudeau's success, it has included a strong showing in British Columbia. And now he's in third place, like far back third place. Chris, this is he has the real risk of going below Iggy level.
Ignatieff actually pulled in 19% of the popular vote. I mean, I'm looking at it right now, which is astonishing to me when I look at that. That was still 34 seats, but yeah, like it's there's no telling how low it can go. And to that idea, the tariff thing. I mean, Canadian politicians always do this. They always say, "Well, we'll have to retaliate." But to me, it completely undermines the message. They're saying, "Well, if you impose 25% tariffs on us, that's going to hurt American workers, right? It's going to hurt. It's going to make things more expensive for Americans at the till." But then we say, "Well, we're going to retaliate. So what? Oh, we'll make things more expensive for Canadians at the till from American goods." Like, it's just a no-win situation. What you need is leadership and people with smart arguments and with Trump, negotiating skills and an understanding of how his brain works.
He's a blowhard and a bully, and we're letting it get under our skin that he talks about Canada as the 51st state. Shrug it off, for crying out loud.
Exactly.
And deal with what his main issues were: drug and illegal immigrant flooding into the United States.
Let's jump on that in a minute, but let's just stay with the fact for a moment that all of this is happening with the Liberal Party at this point, and Justin Trudeau is nowhere to be found. He is effectively AWOL. He's hiding. He has no public events today. He's spoken to a Christmas party for Liberal donors of the Laurier Club. Then he spoke the next night, made fun of the whole situation at a Christmas party for Liberal staffers. This is happening at a time of great national crisis, and Trudeau, you know, as much as we may enjoy all of this, this is going to hurt us in a very big way.
Well, I mean, he canceled all his year-end media interviews.
I've never seen that.
Which is just like sending up a balloon that says, you know, help, like we're screwed. I mean, why would you? If you're going to hang on, you do the interviews. I mean, that's just bananas to me. I mean, all he does is all he knows how to do is talk. Look deep into people's eyes and talk. If he's not even going to talk, what is he in this for?
Do you think he's going to stick around? I would take the fact that he's doing the cabinet shuffle as, you know, a proof point that he doesn't plan on resigning anytime soon. What about you, Chris?
A cabinet shuffle. I mean, that doesn't say resigning to me. It says, hey, look, I can still get, 20 odd people to back me, and so away I go.
Lorne, what do you think about Trudeau's future? Is he going to stay or go?
All the people who whisper in his ears say, you can survive this. This is a communications problem. They've been saying that to each other now for 2 or 3 years. The big cabinet shuffle in July of 2023 was all about changing the communications, not changing the policies, not changing the strategies, just changing the ministers who would go out and take the message to the people, because they were firmly convinced, and I think they're firmly convinced today, that their policies are the very best policies for Canada, and all that's getting in the way is their own communications failures. But more than that, Well, there's disinformation on the internet. That's why we have to regulate what's on the internet, because nobody's listening to what we're doing that's so wonderful for this country. It's utter rubbish, but I think he is caught up in all of that and really does believe that he is the best leader for the time, and that if he can just weather this, eventually people will see that Poilievre is a bad man and Singh isn't as good as he is. And, in Quebec, then the BQ don't have the same to offer that they do. And I would give him more than a 50-50 betting chance of sticking around.
It would require, as I said before, it would require the caucus to sack up and refuse to do his bidding. And there's no sign of that.
The last three Tory leaders in the UK, all of whom were prime ministers at the time, were all pushed out by their caucus.
They have a very different system there.
They don't have a particularly different system. They have a different culture. They have a different convention. They're more used to doing it than we are. But Chris is absolutely right. There is nothing in the parliamentary rules. There's nothing in Canadian law that says the caucus has to cooperate with PMO. They could tell them all to sod off and that they're not going to cooperate. Some of them clearly are. I mean, Oliphant, the fellow in
Toronto, Don Valley
West, who sent out the message this morning to his constituents. Please come to an emergency meeting and tell me what you think I should do about the leader. That's not very courageous. I think he knows where he needs to go on this. He just wants to make sure that he's not going to upset everyone in his nice little suburban riding by ditching Trudeau. But they've all got to do this. I've never seen this kind of tumult in a caucus that didn't lead to somebody going.
Yeah, I'll say this about the Martin guys who pushed Chrétien out. They at least put their faces and their names out there. And they went in front of cameras and microphones and spoke to reporters, and they said, well, this is why the guy should go. And then you were talking earlier, Lorne, about how there's nobody there that can say, hey, boss, time's up, time to go. I've spoken to Stephen Ledrew about this extensively. Ledrew was the party president for the Liberals at that time. And he's told me about driving up to Ottawa to go tell Chrétien it's time to go. And he said it was very nerve-wracking for him to do that. And Chrétien said, yeah, but you look at the polls, I'm going to win. Well, he said, yes, but I'm required to hold a leadership review vote by the party constitution, and the Martin guys have completely taken over the party, and they're going to beat you. That's the way that Chrétien ended up leaving, albeit with an 18-month runway. Trudeau, so he's got a few MPs saying, you got to go, but not, I mean, when they pushed Chrétien out, he was at 40% in the polls. Trudeau's at 20%, and they can't even get half a caucus to say, get lost, buddy.
Yeah, I was struck by Anthony Housefather, who's a relatively independent-minded Montreal MP, who sort of said, he had this comment sometime in the last, 72 hours. I mean, time has lost all meaning over the last week, but he sort of said, he said, Justin Trudeau's best day as prime minister will be better than Pierre Poilievre's. Sorry, Justin Trudeau's worst day as prime minister will be better than Pierre Poilievre's best day as prime minister. But I think it would be better if we had a new Liberal leader. And it's like, how many options do you think are on the table here?
Yeah.
Interesting hearing that.
Do something or nothing will happen.
But the Libs also have a big enthusiasm problem, right? You look at the by-election in Langley, Cloverdale, in BC on Monday night. Yes, it's an overwhelming Conservative victory, 66% to 16%.
16% turnout, too.
Yeah, but it was a 16% turnout. So the Tories came out. Their numbers were about half of what they had been in the last, or less than half of what they'd been in the last election, but at least they came out. The Liberals didn't
couldn't be bothered.
They didn't poll at 16%. The Tories didn't poll at 66%, but the Liberals just didn't go to the ballot boxes. And I think that's what you're going to, if this chaos continues and an election is called without a clear leader for a new clear leader for the Liberals, you're going to see that. There are a lot of people who say, well, I won't vote for Poilievre, but they won't go to the polls either. And a lot of Liberals are going to lose in three-way races because none of their supporters come up.
Well, we need to take a quick break, but I will tell you all that ever since Chris said near the beginning of the podcast that, how alone is Trudeau, I've been picturing him wandering around Rideau Cottage singing Celine Dion's rendition of All By Myself. So there's a visual for you. We'll talk more about this and the Trump threats and who is stepping up in Trudeau's absence when we come back. More in moments.
This episode is brought to you by LifeLock. The holidays mean more travel, more shopping, more time online, and more personal info in places that could expose you to identity theft. That's why LifeLock monitors millions of data points every second. If your identity is stolen, their US-based restoration specialist will fix it, guaranteed or your money back. Get more holiday fun and less holiday worry with LifeLock. Save up to 40% your first year. Visit LifeLock.com/podcast. Terms apply.
Deck your home with Blinds.com. La 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 la. La 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 Blinds.com. DIY or let us install. La 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 la. La 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 Blinds.com. Free design consultation. Free. Plus free samples and free shipping. Free.
Head to Blinds.com now for up to 40% off select styles plus a free professional measure.
La 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 Blinds.com.
Rules and restrictions may apply.
¿Hablas español?
Sprichst du Deutsch?
Kann du Norsk?
If you've had that sound from Babbel before, I bet you do. Babbel is the science-backed language learning app that actually works. With quick 10-minute lessons handcrafted by over 200 language experts, Babbel gets you on your way to speaking a new language in just a few weeks. With over 16 million subscriptions sold and a 20-day money-back guarantee, just start speaking another language with Babbel. Right now, up to 55% off your Babbel subscription at babbel.com/Spotify podcast. Spelled BABBEL.com/Spotify podcast. Rules and restrictions may apply.
So Trudeau since Monday has pretty much been absent, AWOL, we've said. And maybe that's not such a bad thing because the week before he had come out twice in public and, well, angered the Americans in the middle of this, crisis that we're seeing. On the Monday in Halifax, he had spoken about how, Americans had voted for change for the sake of change. And Canadians shouldn't do that because we need to be smarter and make good choices, and implying Americans didn't. And then the next day gives a speech to Equal Voice and says how awful it is that Americans chose yet again not to elect a woman as president. Rich coming from the guy that beat 4 women to become Liberal leader. Maybe he should have bowed out when he saw there was a woman on the ballot. But anyways, he laments Kamala Harris losing to Donald Trump, and that makes all kinds of headlines in the United States. So maybe it's good that Trudeau is shutting up. But the fact is, we need leadership at this point. Did either of you have Doug Ford as Captain Canada in this situation? And, with a strong supporting second role by Alberta Premier Danielle Smith, because Ontario's Premier and Alberta's Premier, two folks who are not exactly allies of Justin Trudeau, are effectively doing his job at this point.
I mean, provincial premiers are more known for sloughing off their problems on Ottawa than adopting them as their own. I wouldn't have seen it coming, but once I heard Doug Ford talking that way, I sort of thought, oh, this is actually right in his wheelhouse. Like this makes a lot of sense because he can get along with all kinds of different people, but he can also, which I think helps him be able to kind of wave his fist sometimes as well. Now, I don't think he has any personal relationship with Donald Trump.
No, he doesn't. In fact, he did a radio interview in New York City with one of Trump's good friends, by the way. I mean, this is what Trudeau's government should be doing. He talks to this guy named John Katsimadis, who owns WABC in New York, the radio station. And Katsimadis asked him, have you ever met President Trump? And he said, once when he came to Toronto for the unveiling of the Trump Tower, my brother was mayor. I met him briefly. So that's the only relationship they have.
Yeah, but I can see how Trump might, respect Ford a little bit. So but look, I mean, you see these things with in Alberta with Danielle Smith essentially kind of adopting border control as one of her own issues. I mean, that's not the way the country's supposed to work. But But this is what happens when you have a complete leadership vacuum.
But that really surprised me that the provincial government out here decided to spend almost $30 million hiring 51 border security sheriffs, fixing them up with all-weather drones and dispatchers and vehicles, and it's a genuine border security force for a 298 kilometer long. We don't have a huge long border with the United States because the skinny part of Alberta is down there at the bottom. But this basically was her saying, look, the Americans are threatening us with tariffs because we're letting in too many illegal immigrants and too many drug dealers. So let's do something about that. That's what the federal government should have done.
So Danielle Smith let me in on a little secret this week. I had a sit down with her when she was in Toronto. She came out for the Premier's meeting that Ford called, and then you saw the photo of Ford looking like he's holding the Last Supper with all the reporters around him asking him questions. But the Premiers all got along for the most part and said they're united on this. There's some differences, but anyways, I had a chance to do a sit down interview with Danielle Smith that people can find on the Sun's YouTube page. But she told me straight up, I was giving her kudos for this. And she said, they actually started this about a year and a half ago before Trump's border threats because of all the fentanyl going back and forth across the border. And so that was the genesis of this plan. And she said, we had a running head start by the time Trump showed up and said this. So, I mean, good. Take advantage of that. But while everyone's saying fentanyl's not a problem, she told me it is. And she said that in Alberta and BC, you're getting these super labs set up and that it is increasingly becoming a problem. She said the migrant issue is a big issue in Eastern Canada and especially Quebec, right near where Tom Homan, the Ontario and Quebec border area, where Tom Homan, Trump's new border czar, is from in Western New York. That's the big migrant issue. And she said, but out west in BC and Alberta, it's drugs. The Trudeau government saying, there's no problem with drugs. It only comes from Mexico, and we're 1% of the problem. I'm watching clips of Homan doing an interview with Tucker Carlson, talking about how it has increased, the illegal migrants have increased in some areas by 600 to 800% over the past couple of years. And I've looked at the numbers. He's right, because these are Biden administration numbers. And Chris, if you listen to Dominic LeBlanc or anyone in the Trudeau government, they're saying this isn't an issue. That's not how you win in a negotiation, by telling the person you're negotiating with, oh, you're completely wrong. And the issue you just raised, it doesn't even really exist.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, even if the most fentanyl currently coming into the United States doesn't come from Canada, that doesn't mean that it couldn't increase in the future, because we know that there's more domestic capacity coming online, so to speak, in these super labs. I mean, the border is one of those problems that we've just always ignored. And I think to me, it's always seemed ridiculous that we don't have some kind of common perimeter, some kind of harmonized visa rules or refugee rules or whatever, quite apart from anything else, just because it's such a long border and neither country does a particularly good job. You know, it's hardly sealed on either side, and it would require enormous resources to make secure. And with Trump, if Trump goes ahead with his deportations and stuff, I mean, that's just that's gonna send people scrambling north, south, east, west, and we don't have any real capacity to do anything about it. And I noticed this week, one of the things was the Trudeau government said, well, they're proposing a joint strike force or something. We'll work with Washington to do this. And it's like, no, that's not what he's asking for. He's asking for you to step up, right? And whether he's right or not, he's the elephant and we're the mouse. So what's your plan?
So as I'm watching all this unfold, I was reminded of a news conference that I was at in Washington at the White House years ago. I went down to cover Stephen Harper going down to meet with Barack Obama. It's 2011, Lorne, February 2011, and there's two things on the agenda. One is the deterioration of governments in the Middle East, and we're seeing that with Syria right now, and the whole Arab Spring was on the discussion. But the real reason for the meeting and the news conference was Harper trying to work with Obama to harmonize things, just what Chris was talking about. And he wanted a fortress North America to secure the border so that Canadians weren't stopped. We stopped everybody on the outside. And so that's Harper 2011. Now you've got the Americans saying, wait a minute, you let in, or we've had 198,000 encounters, an 82% increase over the last couple of years. 43,000 of them are Indian nationals that you let into your country on work visas or student visas, who then came down to declare asylum in the U.S. We've got a problem, and our government doesn't say, yeah, let's work together to fix that. They say, there is no problem. In fact, they're still putting out the line that there were only 24,000 people that went across the border illegally last year. Andrew Coyne of the Globe and Mail is parroting them. No, it's 198,000 people. Almost 199,000, and they won't even acknowledge it.
No, because they're progressives, and they have to, in their own mind, show how progressive they are by basically having open borders. They are talking now, of course, you've heard Mark Miller, the immigration minister, over the last few months talk about how much they're cutting back on immigration. They're really reining in. They're not. They will maybe cut back the numbers by about 18% over the
after
next
doubling them.
After
doubling permanent residency, but the other stuff, it went up, what, 6-8 times?
Yeah, exactly. And we have, as they will admit themselves, there are 4.9 million people in Canada whose visas will expire between now and the end of next year. And they have no plan. They have no idea where those people are, much less any plan to make sure that they leave. And their response every time you bring this up is, oh, no, we have every confidence that those people will leave on their honor.
The budget will balance itself.
Yeah, I mean, you'll sometimes hear people say, oh, like, well, we don't have exit controls, as if that's like, as if that sort of negates the complaint or negates the worry. Like, well, we don't have any way to know when these people leave, so we'll just assume that they are. Like, I mean, the number of people that need to leave. And I mean, look, it's true that they're not cutting immigration except relative to their own height. But I mean, they are projecting a smaller number, like a smaller population of Canadians in by a little bit in the next couple of years, which is extraordinary for a Liberal government. I mean, how badly has this government screwed up immigration that it's now out there saying, well, we need a smaller Canada? I mean, it's just mind-boggling. And I mean, 4.9 million people, I mean, I remember looking at this a while back, like that's a significant portion of the international flights that go in and out of Canada in a year. I mean, that would drive up airfares just trying to, all those people trying to go home. It's a disaster. And I'm so sick, sorry to kind of go off here, but like, I'm so sick of hearing about this immigration backlash that we're supposedly seeing in Canada. Oh, people are turning against immigrants. They're blaming immigrants for, housing. They're not. It's a backlash against immigration policy. The idea of immigration was never that the ideal number was infinity. That's why we had limits, and they bollocks it up, and Trudeau won't leave.
Yeah, we're building enough new homes in Canada every year for under 300,000 people, and the federal government is letting in 1.3 million. What's that going to do to housing prices? It's insane what they're doing. And I'm not anti-immigrant, but I am pro-math. And, if you look at this, it just makes no sense. Like I looked at the numbers yesterday when StatsCan came out with housing starts across the country. Alberta has the second highest number of housing starts, although we have the fourth highest population. And Quebec is below us. BC is below us. Ontario is only marginally above us. I mean, we have 45,000 housing starts. Ontario is going to have 81,000 this year. And Ontario has 4 times Alberta's population.
And the numbers in Ontario are cratering.
Yeah. They're just
brutal.
Yeah, it's awful. And this is, so that's not just immigrants, of course. I mean, if it was just immigrants overwhelming the system would still be producing a lot more houses. But if you take a look, for instance, at the suburbs around Toronto, the cost that developers have to pay to municipalities just for the permission to build a house is somewhere between $150,000 and $200,000 per house. So you got to know that you're going to have a huge demand if you're going to risk that kind of money. And so there's lots wrong with the housing market, but the Liberals took this flawed housing market and poured gasoline on it with all of the numbers that they've admitted.
It's interesting you said you're not anti-immigrant but pro-math. I was interviewing Pierre Poilievre back at beginning of September, and that's what he said. And he said it in scrums with the media as well. Somebody asked him about he said, well, I'm going to come up with a formula that looks at how many houses we're building, how many doctors we have, the capacity in our health system. We'll come up with a way, to set a proper immigration target. And there's some comment about him being anti-immigrant. He said, no, this is pro-math. Like, you can't do it.
Well, this is the whole idea. This is why we had targets. I mean, it's not like the immigration targets or quotas were some kind of conservative perversion. I mean, this is what immigration policy is. They just completely lost control of it. Well, and we were supposed to believe that Sean Fraser resigning on Sunday was some kind of crippling loss to the Liberals. I mean, I don't want to blame. I'm not going to blame Sean Fraser for the entire immigration debacle, but for heaven's sake, I mean, he'll wear that for the rest of his career, or he should.
We used to have a prime minister that would lower immigration levels when the unemployment rate went up. It must have been a horrible racist. His name was Pierre Trudeau.
Exactly. And if you have, speaking of Sean Fraser, if you have a minor league third line winger who suddenly decides to retire from the game, I'm not quite sure whether your favorite NHL hockey team cares.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the first thing, what is the first thing that people always say about Sean Fraser? It's that he's a good communicator. And that's, to me, that's everything about the Liberals. There's supposedly the Liberals were upset with Chrystia Freeland for not being able to communicate the economic policies well enough. I mean, they do not learn. I mean, she's not a good communicator.
Oh, she's horrible.
But neither is Justin Trudeau. He's just gotten away with. He's just bamboozled people.
Yeah, he's now started to wear on people's nerves.
Oh, yeah, just a little bit, yeah.
For exactly who he was in 2015. Like
exactly who I always saw him to be, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
It's funny, I was posting some stuff online about, it was our front page at the Sun the other day. The headline was, "It's Trudeauver." And yes. I had people saying to me, wow, it's finally good of the mainstream media to notice that Trudeau's a problem. And I thought, I take it you've never read any of our publications. Let's talk about Pierre Poilievre, because polls would say he's going to win. I don't see how that changes. He's going to win handily. We just don't know when the election's going to be. Do you see him as having the strength and ability to turn around so much of what is wrong? And I'll start with your thoughts on, can he handle Trump and the tariff threats? And we know that if we do fix the border, there will be something else that Trump demands. And it may be crazy, or it might be just something that we should be doing and have promised to do, like NATO. But we know there will be something else. Can Pierre Poilievre handle Donald Trump, Lorne?
Yeah, better than Trudeau. I mean, is he going to be the world's whiz bang at dealing with Donald Trump? I don't know that, but he's going to be better at doing it than Justin Trudeau is, because he's a pragmatist. He's more realistic than, yes, he's got lots of strong ideological ideas, but he is more of a pragmatist than Trudeau ever was. Trudeau is a airy fairy, a pie in the sky, artsy type of guy. And that's never changed. That's why their wokeism with the Liberals has done them in, because they don't know how to do anything practical. And my hope is that Poilievre at least listens to people. For instance, we've been hearing in our business that for about 2 years, people at Immigration Canada were telling the Liberals, you can't do this. You simply cannot let this many people in. And they have ignored them. Well, those same people may be telling Poilievre that too, and at least I think he would listen to them. So do I think he's going to do better than Trudeau? Yes. Is he going to be the answer to everything? I don't know.
Put not your trust in princes is my view. But it was back in April that Justin Trudeau himself said, beginning of April, he said, we're bringing in people faster than we can absorb. And I thought, wow, if only you knew someone that could do something about it. And it took him until, November to announce that he was doing something about it. And those announcements won't take effect for quite some time. Your thoughts, Chris, on Poilievre and the job ahead of him and whether he's up to it?
I think my impression of Trump with respect to Canada is that he actually understands how important the relationship is trade-wise. I mean, if you look at like Trudeau is someone who, if he was an American politician, I feel like Trump would have given a nickname and just
Governor of Canada?
Well, okay. But see, to me, that seemed really all pretty much in good fun. That was my impression. Like that whole thing about the 51st state comment at the dinner. I mean, I think that was clearly a joke. Only Canadians would have, clutched their pearls and said, "Oh my God, he actually wants to annex us." I don't think that's what it is. But
now he's just continuing to have fun with it by mocking him on social media.
Fun with it, but when he wants to be mean-spirited and brutal, he's mean-spirited and brutal. I don't get that from as much as I don't think him and Trudeau have anything in common. I don't get real antipathy from Trump towards Trudeau, and I suspect that will transfer over to Poilievre. Like I think personal relationships are definitely very important for Trump. Like you need to kiss the ring, so to speak. Hopefully, as not as unhumiliatingly as possible, but I don't see any reason why Poilievre can't at least be as good, be a wash. And I could see lots of reasons why it would be better, because as Lorne says, he's willing to take on, he's willing to actually, he believes that the problems that Trump sees actually exist, whereas Trudeau clearly just thinks they're fantasies that he has to deal with a communication strategy.
I'll give you one practical example of the Liberals' inability to deal with real issues. In the fall fiscal update on Monday, they said they were going to spend $1.3 billion on border security. That would be a drop in the bucket, but
over 6 years.
But then it turns out it's over 6 years, and it's all backloaded. It's not this year and next year. It starts off in 2026 and goes up from there. Well, they don't plan to do that.
Suddenly they're worried about the budget.
Yeah, exactly. But at the same time, in the same fiscal update, they said this year and next, they're going to spend $600 million confiscating long guns from law-abiding Canadian gun owners. So they still haven't broken out of their woke progressive mentality and looked at the real world. If you don't do something that satisfies the American administration that we're doing the best we can to prevent illegal immigrants from going to the States, they're going to put tariffs on that, as you said early on in this, Brian, shave several points off of our GDP. If you don't confiscate law-abiding gun owners' guns, what are the Americans going to do? They're going to laugh at you, but other than that, it's not going to cost anything. But that's a higher priority for these guys than dealing with the border issue.
Well, and I mean, Canadians have a border issue too, not least with guns. The vast majority of guns used in crime in Canada come across the border from the United States. And every, it feels like twice a year we get an announcement from the federal government saying we're going to crack down on this. And nothing ever happens. Maybe that's a better place to spend $600 million.
Yeah, I was going to say that'd be a better spot for that $600 million. But Lorne, I don't know why you think we would have any fiscal room to spend any money on the border. Do you know how tight this budget is? I mean, sure, we're increasing spending up from $513 to $539 million, or billion. So we're only increasing spending by $36 billion. Where do you think we're going to find money for border security or anything else?
No, that's a question. I thought that was a statement. I agree. So even when they know they're in trouble, they cannot do the smart, practical, grown-up thing. They simply can't. It's not in their DNA to act like a government. You think it's a problem with the civil servants working from home still. I think a lot of these ministers are just phoning it in too. There really isn't a practical grasp on what the major issues are and how, even if you're going to deal with them like progressives do, and I'm going to disagree with a lot of that, you're at least going to do something that is practical, that you can see the effects of. These guys have increased federal spending from $281 billion when they came in 2015 to $539 billion. It's a 92% increase in nominal spending.
But our services are 92% better.
Yeah, that's my point. What do you see for that extra 92%? It's bizarre.
Well, this week has proven the adage that all political columnists like to pull out at some point, and that is the quote attributed to Harold Macmillan, "Events, dear boys, events." This was definitely an eventful week, and we're probably going to see more in the days and weeks to come. Lorne, Gunter, Chris Selley, thanks so much for the time today.
You bet.
Thanks, Brian.
Full Comment is a Postmedia podcast. My name's Brian Lilly, your host. This episode was produced by Andre Prue. Theme music by Bryce Hall. Kevin Libin is the executive producer. You can subscribe to Full Comment on Apple Podcasts, Google, Spotify, Amazon, wherever you get your podcasts. Listen through the app and help us out. Leave a rating, give us a review, tell your friends about us. Thanks for listening. Until next time, I'm Brian Lilly.